Hello! Ohuhu have sent me some of their Halawa coloured pencils, and I was thinking what better way to try them out than in my Ohuhu sketchbook. Let's get into it! It's always satisfying to peel the plastic off a brand new tin of pencils. And these have been on the market for a few months now. I'm a bit late to the party. All of the reviews for these were done months ago by other channels, but they contacted me recently to try them out, so I thought I would show them today. I like the tin. It's got a lovely design on the front, and I think this might be the first set they've ever released in coloured pencils. This is a set of 72 pencils. I don't know yet if they will release any larger sets. It probably will happen eventually though, as a lot of companies tend to do that. But here's what we have so far, with the general idea of the colour range on the back of the box. Interestingly, they're made in Vietnam. I only just noticed that now. I thought they were made in China, but I was wrong. It's nice to have something a bit different. Let's pop the lid open and see what's inside. This is the first time I had opened this because I just pulled it out of the plastic, and there is some paperwork in there with the pencils underneath. And the delightful new pencil smell. There's a user manual here, but it's written in multiple languages, so the English is just this little bit on the front. As you can see, it says they are oil-based pencils, so they're going to be competing with quite a lot of brands out there on the market, and I might do some comparisons a bit later, but we're just going to focus on these for the moment. They've provided a swatch card with all of the names and numbers. I think that is excellent. I always love it when companies do that. And then we have 2 layers of pencils, and a bit of foam here which is overlapping from underneath. All of the pencil leads look pristine. The inserts remind me of Derwent, and the tin itself has a hinged lid, much like the Polychromos by Faber-Castell. The pencils themselves also look like Polychromos, so you can see there's 2 layers and a fairly extensive colour palette. That bit of foam was getting in the way and I realised it came out, so I'm just going to remove that now. It's always so satisfying to see the pencils before they've been used, when they're all the same height and are arranged in beautiful colour order. I usually get them out of order after a while, but here's what one of the pencils looks like. It has Ohuhu Halawa, and then it's got the name and the number of the pencil on the back. This one's azure blue. It's printed in gold, so it's a little hard to see on camera, but it's much easier to see in person. They have a decently thick lead, and my first impressions were they look like nice sturdy pencils. So just before I get into my sketchbook, I think I'm going to swatch all the colours out on that handy card there, and just get an idea of what colours are actually in here. Which then also gives me drawing inspiration, and I just noticed this on the tin: draw, feel, empower. Can you pick which is which brand? I swear they all look the same, but I have here Faber-Castell Polychromos, then I've got the Holbein Black, and lastly is the Ohuhu Black. I feel like I want to do a comparison between some of these pencil brands because they're all marketed as oil-based, and they do look very similar to each other. I'd be curious to know if they perform the same or if there are differences. Here's one difference: the Ohuhu has a gold end, which is on all of their pencils. And this is where I got a bit sidetracked, swatching out all 3 black pencils just to see if I could notice any difference. I swatched them out lightly, and then I added layers to make a light to dark gradient. And while I swatch these out, I'll just mention the prices of these things. The Ohuhu ones are currently at about 75 Australian dollars on Amazon. When I looked up Faber-Castell, which have tins of 60 or 120, the 60 tin was roughly twice that of the Ohuhu price. Even the set of 36 was about $90, and the Holbeins are hideously expensive to buy in Australia, maybe a bit cheaper in Japan, but not as cheap as Ohuhu. And honestly, just on this one little swatch, I really can't tell that much difference between all 3 pencils. Polychromos might be just a bit blacker than the other 2, but it's not a significant difference, and you can see all of them have a bit of a sheen on that paper. This is definitely something I need to investigate further down the track. Let's see what all the Ohuhu pencils are going to be like. The swatch card almost caught me out. The colour order goes down rather than across, so I had to rub that one out. I was thinking persimmon is not a bright yellow colour. Anyway, I got going eventually. This set has lots of bright colours, which is a good thing in my opinion, and it also has a pretty decent balance of different colours, so it's not too heavy on the yellows, for example. Maybe slightly more of them to the orange side, if anything. but otherwise they merged pretty seamlessly from one colour to the next. And I was just putting something under my paper because I was getting some texture coming through from the core flute underneath. That was much better now. Except of course I had the card on an angle, so it's a bit difficult to see the ones right at the bottom of the card here. Oops! I'll show the whole thing in a moment anyway, but I'm really liking the colour selection in here. There's some very pretty pinks. They say the pencils are light fast, but pinks generally aren't as a rule anyway, regardless of the brand, so I wouldn't consider those to be light fast just as a first impression, but I could be wrong. I would have to do some light fast tests to actually prove this. Even though I didn't do any colouring today, I would probably use these in my colouring books, in which case light fastness isn't an issue. I think if you're a pencil aficionado, you might already have colours like this, but it is still a really nice set just on its own. And if you're starting out, this is definitely one to consider because the price is very reasonable. And if the polychromos are a bit out of range, then this is something that would be a decent alternative. The pencils laid down smoothly and I didn't notice any scratching. They are on the firmer side, which I kind of expected because that's very much like polychromos and even the Holbein to some extent. I find oil-based pencils do tend to lean towards the firmer side. If you're looking for something softer, then you'd probably want to go for the Prismacolor Premier pencils or even the Caran d'Ache Luminance. Those are wax-based and they do perform quite differently to oil-based pencils, at least in my experience. I think if this set has a dominant colour, it would be the greens. You can see there's quite a lot of them, but green is always useful to have, especially for colouring foliage, so I don't mind having more in the green section. I think if they're going to expand the set, I'd like to see some more blues, especially a really dark indigo, maybe a nice deep plum colour. And I think they could probably expand out the browns and the greys a little bit, particularly adding a reddish brown that leans more towards the orange side, like a good russet colour. I did want to use that a bit later on and I found I was just missing that. We'll see that when I do my sketches. Now, I hadn't actually sharpened any of the pencils at this stage, and that can also affect how they lay down, as pencils tend to work at their optimum when they've been completely sharpened, but I always find it really hard to sharpen pencils when they're brand new. I usually have to use them a few times and then sharpen them. Once I've got a few going, then it's not so difficult. But it's hard to mar that perfection of all the pencils being the same length. I'm just finishing up with the greys, and they do have quite a few light tones which I guess could be skin colours, so I think they could probably use a few more mid-tones and maybe some darker ones just in that region. Finishing up with white, which really didn't show, but here's the entire colour palette. I'm liking it so far, and I think there's potential for them to add more colours to really expand the range. Both the gold and silver are decent pencils, dare I say they're better than the polychromos ones, so they've done well with them. They could probably add some more blacks and greys, but overall as a set of 72 I think it's really nice. I have no issues with it. But swatches never tell the full story. Let's try out my Ohuhu sketchbook with these Ohuhu pencils in it. This is mixed media paper, and I've not really done much in the way of coloured pencils in this book, so I'm curious to see how they'll go. I'll just bring that out a bit so we can actually see the page. I'd originally thought about doing a full spread, but then I remembered that this book is quite large and coloured pencils take ages, so I'm actually just going to do one side and I'm going to break the page up using this square stencil, which I think I got off Amazon. I'll link it if I can find it, and I'll fill the page with some smaller pictures. I'm going to fill this page with some Australian animals. Nick and I actually went on a little holiday recently, just for 5 nights, to the Great Ocean Road, Apollo Bay to be exact. There's always an abundance of wildlife down there, so I took lots of photos of birds and marsupials, and I thought I would put a few of them into my book here. I'm just starting off with the background. I drew in a very sketchy picture of this bird, which is a New Holland honeyeater. And I decided to work on the background first. You can see I'm just kind of sketching it in. I'm a bit rusty when it comes to coloured pencil drawings. I just haven't done that much lately. I've been more into paint pens recently, but it's nice to go back to pencils. I'm blending out that background using odourless mineral spirits, and the pencils had no issues blending out with it. They dissolved easily, and this paper held up really well to that. While I let that dry, I started on a second picture. And I made my bird too big, so I extended that square to a rectangle. This one's a female splendid fairy wren. They are so cute and they're so hard to photograph because they don't stop moving, but I got lucky with that snap. I thought I would go a little sketchier with this particular picture, so I'm not going to add heaps of layers or anything like that. Fully rendered coloured pencil drawings just take hours and hours. I find as I age, I get more impatient and I just want artwork to be a lot faster than spending forever on one piece. I can completely appreciate coloured pencil artists who put in tens, hundreds of hours into these pictures, but it's just too much for me. I also find that my wrist starts to hurt a lot more quickly these days, so I've just gone for a more sketchy approach. I actually really like how this drawing turned out though. And even with 1 or 2 layers, the pencils were decently pigmented and I was able to get quite a lot on the paper with just one pass of the pencils. I'm just making the top part lighter and I'm merging into a lighter green. A few touch-ups at the end and this one was pretty much done. Now I've just got my hand on some wax paper so I don't smudge anything because I'm returning to my first picture and I'm drawing in the actual honey eater, which is mostly black, white and grey. It does have some yellow on its feathers, but you couldn't see it in this particular drawing. I finally used my sharpener and this picture wasn't my favourite because I couldn't get the feathers quite right on the body, but I just kept persevering with it and I'm just colouring in the foreground part of the background. Once again, doing this very quickly and sketchily, and maybe you can see how that pencil has come to a really nice sharp point. These pencils are nice and easy to sharpen, they don't break easily, and that's always a great thing because I always get frustrated when pencils just break in the sharpener, but none of them did that, so that's always a big win. These pencils feel just as good a quality as many other brands that I've tried, and so I did not have any issues with them in this particular session. My next picture is an emu, this one to be exact, and it's here I wished I had a russet coloured pencil for his eye. I had to use an orange, which wasn't quite the same shade. But honestly, it really didn't matter that much, I got it close enough. I drew it in graphite to begin with and then I rubbed most of it out and I'm going over it again with the black coloured pencil, adding in the darkest parts, then I'm using the dark brown and some really light ones. I think there's cinnamon in there and some of the warm greys, and you briefly saw me use that orange pencil for its eye. Really today I used most of the earth colours rather than the bright ones, which is unusual for me, but of course Australian animals do tend to be more of a natural colour, and I thought this was a good way to test those out. I think I am going to do a follow-up video doing some colouring in a book because I really want to colour with these, and I thought that would be too much to have in this video as well. I decided to save a bit of time and paint in a watercolour background. It's a hot mess, so I'm definitely going to have to deal with this a bit later. While it's dried, I'm moving on to the fourth drawing, and I'm breaking the bird theme here to add in a kangaroo. He was just hanging out, so I got a nice close-up photo of him. I hadn't sketched in this book for a while, so it was nice to come back to it and have yet another sketchbook video for my collection. There's so many pages in this, I'm never getting it done, but I'll just keep working at it. I used quite a lot of the black pencil in these sketches. It was really nice to draw with, and you can see it's going down nice and smoothly, it's quite dark, and it's a pretty decent pencil. All of the colours I tried were great, and there were no issues, like I didn't feel any of the colours were not working or putting down enough pigment. They all just flowed nicely, and there were enough earth tones to draw all of my animals in satisfactorily. I decided to change up the background and I really wanted to use this dark teal colour. It's a really pretty colour and one of my favourites in this pencil set. It's called Rich Blue Green and it contrasts nicely with the neutral tones of the kangaroo. The lighter azure blue blended in perfectly with this one, and just to smooth out that background a bit more, I decided to get the odorless mineral spirits again, and I'm just blending it out with a cotton bud. It's so much better like that. Now back to this emu background because it really needs some attention. The pencils worked well over the top of the dried watercolour, but I really wanted to get rid of that ugly line between the blue and the buff titanium colour, so I started with pencils. It just wasn't opaque enough, so I'm actually using a bit of paint pen here just to mask that ugly line that I'd made, and this helped a lot. The emu is in grass, so this worked out really well, and I'm just tidying it all up, adding in a bit more pencil line to get some detail, a bit more paint pen on top, and I am almost done with this picture too. One last thing to do, I wanted to roll a nice black line around each box just to make them stand out and look neater, and then I will finish up with this page. I did consider doing a second page, but my hand was hurting quite a bit, so I left it for now. I'll go more for quality over quantity, hopefully, but this is the finished page. More to the sketchy side rather than fully rendered, but I really love how the pencils look. They're nice and vibrant, they were easy to use, and I think it's a really great set, especially for the price. So I'd love to know in the comments if you have these pencils or if you think they would be decent, and let me know which is your favourite picture. Mine's definitely the fairy wren, but I'm happy with the whole page. And that's all I have for today. I'd like to do a follow-up video colouring with these pencils using some of the brighter colours and hopefully comparing them with some other brands, because I'm really curious now to try them against more expensive ones like the polychromos, and I was just putting all the bits of paper back in there so I don't lose it. A big thank you to Ohuhu for sending me the pencils to try out. They work really well in their sketchbook too. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and you might want to subscribe for more videos. Here's a couple of other videos to view in the meantime, and I will see you all again really soon in my next one. Have a great day, and I'll swatch you later. Bye!